The stagecoach lurched to a halt outside Redemption Creek, and Catherine Hartford's gloved hands trembled as she clutched her traveling case. 3 days of dust, danger, and desperation had brought her to this remote Montana town, her last hope of escaping her father's arrangement with Marcus Thornhill, a Boston banker twice her age, with a reputation for cruelty toward his previous 2 wives. "End of the line, miss," the driver called down, his weathered face apologetic. "Can't take you no further. Road's washed out ahead." Catherine stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk, her emerald traveling dress now dulled by trail dust. Around her, Redemption Creek sprawled in all directions, a collection of weathered buildings, muddy streets, and suspicious glances from townfolk who clearly didn't welcome outsiders. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She hadn't eaten since yesterday morning, having spent her last coins on the stagecoach ticket. Before we continue with Catherine's journey, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. I'm curious, where are you listening from today? She touched the diamond necklace at her throat, her grandmother's, worth a small fortune. Perhaps she could trade it for a meal and a room until she figured out her next move. The Grand Hotel across the street looked promising, though grand seemed generous for the 2-story structure with peeling paint. As she stepped off the boardwalk to cross the muddy street, a horse and rider thundered past, splashing her dress with filth. Catherine stumbled backward, her case flying open, scattering her belongings into the mud. "Watch where you're going, lady!" the rider shouted without stopping. Tears of frustration burned her eyes as she knelt to gather her ruined belongings. No one stopped to help. This was a mistake. She should have stayed in Boston, should have married Marcus, should have... "Here, let me help you with that." The voice was deep, quiet, and carried an unmistakable authority. Catherine looked up to find a man crouching beside her, already retrieving her scattered items with surprising gentleness. He was perhaps 30, with sun-darkened skin, dark hair that touched his collar, and eyes the color of winter storms. His broad shoulders strained against his faded blue shirt, and his hands, calloused and strong, handled her delicate belongings with unexpected care. "Thank you," she managed, accepting her water-stained journal from him. "I'm afraid I've made quite an impression on your town." A hint of a smile touched his lips. Redemption Creek has seen worse first impressions. He handed her the last of her belongings, a small daguerreotype of her mother. "You look like you could use a hot meal and a safe place to rest." "I can pay," Catherine said quickly, reaching for her necklace. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp as desperation clawed at her throat. "This is worth at least $500. I just need—" "Gold isn't what we need here. You are." His words stopped her mid-gesture. He stood, offering his hand. "Name's Jacob Whitmore. I run the ranch west of town. And before you worry, I'm not making any kind of proposition. I'm offering honest work for honest pay, if you're willing." Catherine stared at his outstretched hand. Every instinct screamed not to trust another man, not after her father's betrayal, not after learning what Marcus had done to his wives. But something in Jacob Whitmore's steady gaze promised safety, a kind she hadn't felt in months. She took his hand. The Whitmore Ranch sat in a valley between 2 ridges, protected from the worst of the Montana winds. As Jacob's wagon rolled up the dirt path, Catherine counted at least 20 horses in the corrals, several outbuildings, and a main house that, while modest, looked solid and well-maintained. The scent of pine and sage filled the air, so different from Boston's coal smoke and sea salt. "It's not what you're used to, I'm guessing," Jacob said, noting her surprised expression. "It's more than I hoped for," Catherine admitted, watching the sun paint the mountains gold and purple. "What kind of work did you have in mind?" "Can you cook?" I'm not sure. I never had to." Jacob's expression remained neutral. "Can you read and write?" "Yes, extensively. My mother insisted on education despite my father's objections." "Good. I need help with the ranch accounts. Previous foreman couldn't read worth a damn. And the books are a mess. Also need someone to cook for the hands during roundup season. That starts in 2 weeks." He pulled the wagon to a stop near the house. "Pay is $20 a month, plus room and board. You'd stay in the house. There's a spare room upstairs. Door has a lock, and I give you my word, you'll never need to use it." $20. It wasn't much compared to her former life, but it was independence. It was choice. It was freedom from Marcus Thornhill's cold hands and colder eyes. "I accept." Jacob helped her down from the wagon, and Catherine felt the strength in his grip, not controlling, but steadying. "One more thing, Miss Hartford. Out here, we don't judge people by where they came from, only by what they do now. Whatever you're running from, it stays in your past, unless you choose to share it." Catherine's throat tightened. "Thank you, Mr. Whitmore." Jacob. Just Jacob. The first week tested every assumption Catherine had ever held about herself. Cooking for ranch hands meant rising before dawn to start the stove, hauling water from the well, and learning the difference between biscuits and boot leather. A lesson her first batch taught painfully. The men were polite but skeptical, clearly wondering how long the city woman would last. She burned the bacon, oversalted the beans, made coffee so weak one of the hands joked it was afraid of being brown. But she kept trying, kept learning, and gradually the disasters became less frequent. Jacob worked alongside his men from sunup to sundown, breaking horses, mending fences, and managing 1,000 details that kept the ranch running. His body moved with the easy strength of someone who'd spent his life doing physical labor, muscles defined by work rather than vanity. Catherine found herself watching him more than she should, noticing the way he gentled a spooked horse with soft words, how he never raised his voice to the men, but commanded their respect anyway. Every evening, he made time to sit at the kitchen table and walk Catherine through the account books. "This entry here," she said one night, pointing to a confusing notation. "It doesn't match the receipt." Jacob leaned closer to look, and Catherine caught the scent of leather and sage and something uniquely him. "Previous foreman liked to skim a bit off the top. That's why I let him go." There are at least a dozen more like this. Catherine's natural facility with numbers took over as she began making corrections. Her education, the one thing her father had given her before deciding she was merely a commodity, finally had purpose. If we reorganize the system, track expenses by category, separate operating costs from capital investments. You sound like you've done this before. My father owned 3 textile mills. I used to review his books every quarter, suggest improvements to his operations. The memory brought a bitter taste, until he decided my only value was as a bargaining chip for a business merger with Marcus Thornhill. Jacob's hand covered hers on the ledger, stopping her increasingly frantic writing. His palm was warm, rough with calluses, and completely gentle. You're not property, you're a person. Don't ever let anyone tell you different." The simple declaration, delivered with absolute conviction, broke something loose in Catherine's chest, something that had been locked tight since the night Marcus had cornered her in her father's study. She pulled her hand away, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how the lamplight cast shadows across Jacob's strong features, how her heart was racing for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. I should finish these entries," she stammered. "Catherine." He waited until she met his eyes. "You're safe here. I meant what I said that first day. You're safe here." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. The nightmares came on her 10th night at the ranch. Catherine woke gasping, tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, Marcus Thornhill's face looming in her dream, his hands around her throat, his breath hot against her ear as he whispered what he'd do to her once they were married. How he'd break her spirit the way he'd broken his previous wives, slowly, carefully, until there was nothing left but obedience. She pressed her hands to her mouth to muffle the sob that tried to escape. Footsteps sounded in the hallway, followed by a gentle knock. "Miss Hartford, you all right?" She opened the door to find Jacob in the hallway, fully dressed despite the late hour. He must have heard her scream. "I'm fine," she lied, pulling her robe tighter. "Just a bad dream." His eyes, those storm-gray eyes that saw too much, traveled over her face, taking in the tears she couldn't quite hide, the way her hands still trembled. "I get them too. Sometimes it helps to talk, but only if you want to." They ended up on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the cold mountain night. Above them, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. More stars than Catherine had ever imagined existed, impossible in Boston, where gas lamps and coal smoke obscured the heavens. "Marcus Thornhill," Catherine said quietly, the name tasting like poison. "That's the man my father wanted me to marry. His first 2 wives both died under suspicious circumstances. Falls downstairs, a sudden illness. When I started asking questions, my father told me I was being hysterical." She drew a shaky breath. "When I refused the engagement, Marcus came to my rooms one night. He said I'd learn to obey or I'd end up like them, that he enjoyed the breaking process." Jacob's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping beneath the skin. "Did he hurt you?" "He tried." Catherine touched her throat, remembering his grip, the terror of not being able to breathe. "I hit him with a candlestick and ran. Took only what I could carry and bought a ticket on the first train west. I've been running for 3 weeks, changing my name, paying for information to stay ahead of his investigators. If he comes here, he'll answer to me." Jacob's voice was quiet, but something in it made Catherine shiver. Not with fear, but with the certainty that he meant every word. "You don't understand. He has money, connections, judges in his pocket. He could destroy you with a telegram." "I see a woman worth saving," Jacob interrupted, turning to face her. "And I'll be damned if I let some Boston coward lay a hand on you. You hear me, Catherine? Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, you're under my protection now." The fierce protectiveness in his voice made Catherine's heart race for entirely different reasons than fear. This was nothing like Marcus's obsessive possessiveness or her father's cold calculation. This was something she'd never experienced before. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would you risk everything for someone you barely know?" Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. 3 years ago, My wife Sarah died bringing in the cattle during a blizzard. I told her to wait for me, told her it was too dangerous, but she was stubborn, wanted to prove she could handle ranch life. His voice roughened. Found her horse 3 miles from here. She'd been thrown, broke her neck in the fall. I got there too late to save her. Jacob, I'm so sorry. I swore I'd never let anyone get close enough to lose again, he continued. Swore I'd keep my distance, keep my heart locked up tight where it couldn't break. But then you stepped off that stagecoach, covered in dust and trying so hard to be brave, and he shook his head. Maybe I can't save everyone, but I can save you, and maybe that's enough to forgive myself for not saving her. Catherine reached out and took his hand. I understand. After Marcus, I swore I'd never trust another man, that I'd rather die alone than risk that kind of helplessness again. And yet here we are, Jacob said softly, his fingers threading through hers. Here we are, she echoed. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars wheeled overhead, and for the first time since fleeing Boston, Catherine felt something that might have been hope. As Roundup approached, Jacob began teaching Catherine to ride. Out here, you need to be able to get yourself to safety if trouble comes, he explained, leading a gentle chestnut mare from the barn. This is Rosie. She's patient with beginners. The first few days were humbling. Catherine fell twice, bruised her pride more often, and learned that riding side saddle, the only way she'd ever been taught, was useless for ranch work. Can't work a ranch sitting sideways, Jacob said, adjusting the stirrups. You're going to have to ride astride. That's not proper. Neither is starving, because you can't ride for help. His tone was gentle but firm. Your choice, Catherine. She chose survival over propriety. Like this, Jacob said, positioning her legs properly in the saddle. His hands on her waist were firm but gentle, and Catherine felt heat flood her face that had nothing to do with exertion. Keep your weight centered. Let the horse feel your confidence. I don't have much of that, Catherine admitted as Rosie shifted beneath her. You have more than you know. Jacob stepped back, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. You left everything behind to save yourself. You learned to cook in a week when you'd never boiled water before. You organized my accounts better than any professional bookkeeper. That takes courage most people never find. The praise, so simply offered, made Catherine's throat tight. When had anyone last told her she was capable rather than ornamental? By the second week, she could post at a trot without clutching the saddle horn. By the third, she convinced Jacob to teach her to shoot. Why do you need to learn this? He asked as they set up bottles on fence posts behind the barn. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, loading cartridges into his Colt revolver. Because I never want to be helpless again. Catherine met his eyes. Because if Marcus comes, I want to be able to protect myself. I won't hide behind you or any man. I need to know I can stand on my own. Something flashed across Jacob's face. Respect, maybe, or something deeper. All right, but first rule, never point it at anything you don't intend to shoot. He handed her the revolver. The gun was heavier than she expected, cold metal against her palm. Jacob moved behind her, his arms bracketing hers as he adjusted her grip. His chest pressed against her back, solid and warm, and Catherine's breath caught. Breathe out slowly as you squeeze the trigger, he murmured near her ear, his voice sending shivers down her spine. Don't pull, squeeze. Let the shot surprise you. The gun kicked in her hands. The bottle exploded in a spray of glass. Catherine lowered the weapon, exhilaration flooding through her veins. Again, Jacob's laugh was low and warm. Yes, ma'am. By the end of the afternoon, she could hit 5 out of 6 targets. Jacob's pride in her accomplishment shone in his eyes, making her feel 10 feet tall. "You're a natural," he said, carefully taking the gun from her hands. "Reminds me of Sarah. She learned to shoot faster than anyone I'd ever seen." "Tell me about her," Catherine said impulsively. They sat on the fence as the sun painted the sky orange and gold. Jacob talked about his wife, how they'd met at a church social, how she'd insisted on learning every aspect of ranch work, how her laughter could fill a room. The love in his voice was evident, but so was the grief, still raw after 3 years. "She'd like you," Jacob said finally. "She always said the world needed more women who refused to be told what they couldn't do." "I wish I could have met her." "Me too." Jacob turned to her, and something in his expression made Catherine's heart hammer. "She also told me, right before she died, that if anything happened to her, I shouldn't spend the rest of my life alone. That I should find someone who made me want to live again, not just survive." He paused. "I didn't understand what she meant." "Not until you." "Jacob, I'm not asking for anything," he said quickly. "I just needed you to know, whatever happens, whatever you decide, you've given me hope again. That's a gift I can never repay." Catherine wanted to say something, wanted to tell him that she felt it too. This growing connection that terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. But fear still held her tongue. What if she was wrong? What if this was just gratitude, desperation, the first kindness she'd been shown, making her confuse safety for love? So she just squeezed his hand and watched the sunset paint the mountains in shades of fire. Roundup brought controlled chaos to the ranch. 15 additional hands arrived to help drive the cattle to the railhead in Helena. Catherine cooked for 20 men 3 times a day, managed supplies, calculated costs, and kept the accounts current, even as exhaustion made her hands shake and her back ache. The men's initial skepticism had faded into grudging respect. She kept them fed, their pay accurate, and didn't complain about the brutal hours. A few even started asking her advice on letters to sweethearts, reading primers, how to save money. On the 3rd night, she was preparing dinner when she heard shouting from the barn. She rushed outside to find 2 of the hands restraining a third, a man she didn't recognize. He wore expensive traveling clothes, now dusty and disheveled, and his eyes were cold as he struggled against the men holding him. "Caught him trying to steal horses," one of the men explained. "Says he's looking for someone." Catherine's blood turned to ice as the thief raised his head. Recognition hit her like a physical blow, stealing the air from her lungs. It was William Sykes, Marcus Thornhill's hired investigator, the man who tracked 3 of Marcus's previous interests halfway across the country before they mysteriously returned to face their fates. "There you are, Miss Hartford," Sykes said with a nasty smile that showed too many teeth. "Or should I say Miss Catherine Elizabeth Hartford of Boston, currently wanted for theft of valuable family heirlooms? Mr. Thornhill has been looking everywhere for you. He's most eager for your return." "She's not going anywhere." Jacob's voice cut through the night like a blade as he emerged from the shadows. His hand rested on his gun, and every line of his body radiated dangerous intent. "I have authorization from—" "I don't care if you have authorization from God himself. This is Montana territory, and here my word is law on my own land." Jacob's eyes were cold as winter steel. "You have 10 seconds before I consider you a trespasser threatening my people." Sykes's eyes narrowed. "She stole from her family. There are warrants." There are no warrants, Jacob interrupted. There's a wealthy man trying to force a woman back into his control. I know the difference. He took a step forward. Now you have a choice. You can ride out of here and tell Thornhill that Catherine Hartford is under my protection. Or you can try to take her and find out what happens to men who threaten women on my land. The two ranch hands tightened their grip on Sykes, and several more emerged from the bunkhouse, alerted by the commotion. They formed a wall between Sykes and Catherine, their faces grim. Thornhill will come himself, Sykes spat. He has legal claim on her father's property, which means he has claim on her. He has powerful friends, Whitmore. Judges, marshals, politicians. You're just a dirt farmer with delusions of... Jacob moved fast. One moment he was standing still. The next his fist connected with Sykes's jaw with a crack that made Catherine wince. The investigator crumpled. I told you, Jacob said quietly. 10 seconds. Boys, get him on his horse and point him toward town. If he's still on my land in an hour, shoot him for trespassing. They watched Sykes stumble to his horse, one hand pressed to his rapidly swelling jaw. He mounted clumsily, his eyes venomous as they fixed on Catherine. You'll regret this, Whitmore. Both of you. Thornhill doesn't forgive and he doesn't forget. He'll destroy everything you've built. So will I, Jacob said softly. Now get. Sykes spurred his horse into the darkness. The men dispersed slowly, returning to their duties, but keeping weapons close. Catherine realized she was shaking, ice spreading through her veins. He'll be back, she whispered. Marcus won't give up. He never gives up. His previous, the women before me, he hunted them all down. No matter where they ran, how far they went, he found them all. Jacob turned to her, his eyes fierce and determined. Then he'll find out what it means to cross a Montana rancher, protecting what's his. What's yours? The question came out barely audible. You, if you'll have me. The words were rough, urgent, pulled from somewhere deep in his chest. I know it's fast. I know I promised myself I wouldn't do this again, wouldn't risk my heart on someone I could lose. But Catherine, these past weeks with you, you've brought light back to this place. To me. You've made me remember what it feels like to want to wake up in the morning, to look forward to evening conversations, to hope for tomorrow. Jacob, I'm not asking you to love me. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He took her hands in his, and Catherine could feel the trembling in his grip that matched her own. I'm asking you to let me stand between you and the world that tried to break you. I'm asking you to stay. I'm asking for a chance to prove that not all men are like Marcus Thornhill or your father. That some of us know the difference between possession and partnership. Catherine's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed that this was too fast, too dangerous, that she was being foolish. But when she looked into Jacob's eyes, she saw something that Marcus had never offered. Respect. Partnership. The promise of freedom rather than a cage. Together? The word came out barely above a whisper. Together, he confirmed, and pulled her into his arms. Catherine went willingly, pressing her face against his chest and letting herself feel safe for the first time in months. His heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear, and his arms around her felt nothing like a trap. They felt like home. I'll die before I hurt you, Jacob murmured against her hair. I swear it on everything I hold sacred. You're not property. You're not a prize to be won. You're a woman who deserves to choose her own path. And I'm asking, just asking, if maybe that path could lead here, to me. Catherine pulled back enough to look at him. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of Marcus coming, of trusting again, of this feeling between us that I don't quite understand. But I'm more terrified of running for the rest of my life, of never knowing what this could be. Then stay. We'll face whatever comes together. She kissed him then, rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. It was nothing like the brutal kisses Marcus had forced on her. This was gentle, questioning, a promise rather than a demand. Jacob's hands cupped her face with such tenderness that tears pricked Catherine's eyes. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Go slow," Catherine whispered, her voice shaking. "I want this, want you, but I need time to trust it." "We have all the time you need," Jacob promised. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. Not unless it's your choice." Marcus Thornhill arrived 3 days later, with an entourage that would have been impressive in Boston, but looked absurd in the Montana wilderness. A lawyer in an impeccable suit that was already dusty from the road. A federal marshal who looked deeply uncomfortable with his assignment. And Marcus himself, tall and distinguished, and radiating the cold confidence of a man who'd never been told no and meant it. Catherine watched from the ranch house window as Jacob met them in the yard, flanked by his men. Her hands gripped the windowsill hard enough to hurt. "Mr. Whitmore, I presume?" Marcus's voice carried clearly across the yard. Cultured, educated, reasonable. The voice of a man who knew how to charm juries and intimidate witnesses. "I'm Marcus Thornhill of Boston. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I have a woman under my protection who belongs to no one but herself," Jacob replied evenly. "State your business and move on." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. Miss Hartford stole valuable property from her family before fleeing Boston. I have documentation of the theft, a warrant for her arrest, and the legal authority to return her to face charges. He gestured to the lawyer, who produced papers with a flourish. "Miss Hartford," the federal marshal said apologetically, stepping forward. His weathered face suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. "I'm Marshal William Tucker. I'm going to need you to come with me to answer questions about these charges. Mr. Thornhill has provided evidence that—" "That warrant is fraudulent," Catherine called from the porch, forcing herself to walk down the steps on steady legs. Jacob moved to her side immediately, his presence solid and reassuring. "Those documents are forgeries. I took nothing but my own belongings, items my mother left to me in her will." "Catherine, darling." Marcus's voice was oil-smooth as he stepped forward, and Catherine had to force herself not to retreat. "Your father is worried sick about you. This rough frontier life has clearly addled your thinking. The trauma of your mother's death, your subsequent nervous collapse, it's all understandable. Come home with me, and we'll forget this unfortunate episode. You'll have the best medical care, the finest doctors. I'd rather die than return to Boston with you," Catherine said clearly, and had the satisfaction of seeing Marcus's mask slip. For just a moment, a flash of rage in his cold blue eyes. "Marshal," Marcus said, his voice hardening, "do your duty. The woman is mentally unfit and has committed theft. The warrant is valid." Marshal Tucker looked between the armed ranch hands, the steely-eyed rancher, the woman who showed no signs of mental instability, and the Boston banker whose story was starting to sound increasingly suspicious. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't want trouble, but I have to uphold the law. If there's a valid warrant, then uphold it proper," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see an elderly man in a fine suit stepping from a carriage that had arrived unnoticed during the confrontation. He was perhaps 70, with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles, and an air of absolute authority, that made even Marcus pause. "Judge Harrison?" Jacob's surprise was evident. "What are you doing here?" "Mr. Whitmore, Miss Hartford." The judge nodded to them both with warm familiarity before turning cold eyes on Marcus. "Mr. Thornhill, I've been following your activities with great interest. Marshal Tucker, I'll need to see those warrants." "Your Honor," Marcus protested, his voice losing some of its smoothness, "I assure you everything is in order. Miss Hartford's father filed the theft charges himself. I have his signed statement." "You have a statement from a man you were blackmailing," Judge Harrison interrupted crisply, examining the papers with the eye of someone who'd seen every legal trick in the book. "A man whose textile mills you threatened to destroy unless he agreed to your marriage with his daughter. A man who has since recanted those charges and filed a complaint against you with the Boston District Attorney's Office." Marcus's face went white, then red. "You can't prove." "I can prove quite a bit, actually." The judge produced his own sheaf of papers. "I've been corresponding with authorities in Boston for the past 2 weeks, ever since word reached me that you were pursuing Miss Hartford. It seems your previous 2 wives didn't die of natural causes after all. The Boston police have reopened both investigations based on new evidence from household staff, who were previously too frightened to speak." "This is preposterous!" Marcus's composure was cracking, his voice rising. "I am a respected businessman. My reputation—" "Your reputation is that of a man who uses wealth and influence to acquire women like their property, then discards them when they displease you." Judge Harrison's voice was cold as Montana winter. "There's also the matter of your assault on Miss Hartford in Boston. She filed a report with local authorities before she fled. A report that was mysteriously lost until I requested it personally from the chief of police. She's lying. These charges are fabricated by a hysterical woman with a history of mental instability." "I'm not hysterical," Catherine said quietly, but with steel in her voice. "I'm furious. You tried to strangle me when I refused your proposal. You told me you'd break me the way you broke your previous wives. You said I'd learn to obey or end up dead like them." She stepped forward, and this time it was Marcus who retreated a step. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Marcus. You have no power here." Judge Harrison turned to Marshal Tucker. "Marshal, arrest Mr. Thornhill on charges of assault, attempted kidnapping, fraud, and suspicion of murder in the deaths of Eleanor Thornhill and Margaret Thornhill." "You can't do this." Marcus's voice rose to a near shriek as the marshal moved forward with handcuffs. "I have friends in Washington. I have money. I'll destroy all of you." "You have nothing," Jacob said quietly, "except a long ride to jail and a longer trial to face." The next minutes passed in a blur of activity. Marcus fought, threatened, and finally broke, screaming accusations and insults as the marshal dragged him toward the waiting carriage. The lawyer fled on horseback, apparently not eager to be associated with a client facing murder charges. Judge Harrison watched it all with grim satisfaction. When the dust settled, the judge approached Catherine with kind eyes. "My dear, you're quite safe now. Your father has transferred your inheritance to a trust in your name. His way of apologizing for his role in this mess. He also wanted me to tell you that he's deeply ashamed and understands if you never wish to see him again." Catherine felt tears prick her eyes. Is he all right?" "Broken by guilt, but recovering. He's closed his mills temporarily and is working with the authorities to ensure Thornhill faces full justice." The judge patted her hand gently. "You showed remarkable courage, young lady. Not many could have done what you did." He turned to Jacob. And you, Mr. Whitmore, have created quite a stir in the territorial government. Word of your defense of Miss Hartford has spread through every saloon, courthouse, and political office in Montana. The mayor of Redemption Creek asked me to travel here personally to inform you of something rather extraordinary. What's that, Your Honor? Old Samuel Pritchard, who owned the town bank, passed last week. In his will, he specified that his estate should go to the most honorable man in Redemption Creek, one who protects the weak and deals fairly with all. The judge extended his hand, the genuine smile crossing his lined face. The town council was unanimous in their choice. Congratulations, Mr. Whitmore. You've just inherited the Redemption Creek Bank. Jacob looked stunned, his mouth opening and closing without sound. I don't know a bank? Samuel watched you grow up, Judge Harrison explained. He admired how you rebuilt this ranch after your wife's death, how you treat your workers fairly, how you stood up to cattle barons and outlaws alike, and now how you protected Miss Hartford without asking for anything in return, without even knowing she came from wealth. The judge's expression softened. Use it well, son. This town needs men of integrity. That evening, after Judge Harrison departed in his carriage, and the ranch settled into the first peaceful quiet it had known in days, Jacob found Catherine on the porch. She was wrapped in a blanket, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. A bank, he said, sitting beside her. Samuel Pritchard left me a bank. I don't know the first thing about running a bank. I do, Catherine said. My father taught me everything about finance before he decided I was only good for marriage. Banking, investments, risk management, loan structuring. I know all of it. I could help you. Jacob turned to her, searching her face in the twilight. Is that what you want? To help me run a bank? Or are you just looking for a way to repay me for protecting you? I want. Catherine took a breath, gathering courage. I want to stay here, with you, not as an employee, not as someone you're protecting out of duty or guilt, but as my wife. Jacob's voice was rough, with hope and fear and desperate longing. Catherine, I know it's too soon. I know you need time to heal from what Marcus did, but I have to ask, because if there's even a chance. Yes, the word came out strong and clear. Yes, I'll marry you. He pulled her into his arms, and Catherine felt the last of her fear dissolve like morning frost under the sun. This was nothing like Marcus's possessive grip or her father's cold manipulation. This was safety, warmth, and something she'd never dared hope for. A love freely chosen rather than forced. Are you sure? Jacob murmured against her hair. I'm not asking you to save me or repay me. I'm asking because I love you. Because you're the bravest, smartest, most remarkable woman I've ever met. Because I want to build a life with you, not for you or in spite of you, but with you. Catherine pulled back enough to look at him, cupping his face in her hands. I'm sure. I love you, Jacob Whitmore. I think I started falling for you that first day when you saw me at my lowest and offered hope instead of pity. When you gave Catherine Hartford, you came to this town with nothing, and you gave me everything. His eyes shone with emotion. Will you marry me? Will you be my partner in this life, in the ranch, in the bank, in whatever comes next? Yes. She kissed him then, and this time there was no hesitation, no holding back. But I have conditions. His eyebrows rose in amused surprise. Conditions? I want to help run the bank, not just as your wife, but as an equal partner. I want to teach other women to read and manage finances so they're never as helpless as I was. Catherine's voice gained strength as she spoke. I want to make Redemption Creek a place where women like me, women running from bad situations, can find safety and opportunity. Where they can learn skills, earn money, and build lives on their own terms. Jacob's smile was slow and genuine and full of pride. I wouldn't have it any other way. You're not property, Catherine. You're a partner. We'll build something here, something that matters. Together? Together, Catherine confirmed. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Catherine felt heat bloom through her body. When his hand slid into her hair, when he pulled her closer, she went willingly, trusting in a way she'd never thought possible again. Go slow, she whispered when they broke apart, both breathing hard. I want this, want you, but I'm still learning to trust that it's real, that it won't turn into something ugly. I'll die before I hurt you, Jacob said fiercely. We'll go as slow as you need. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. We have all the time in the world. Catherine rested her head against his shoulder, feeling his heartbeat, steady and strong beneath her ear. Tell me about the future. What do you see? I see us running the bank together. You handling the finances because you're brilliant with numbers. Me handling the people because I know this community. I see us expanding the ranch, maybe starting that literacy program you talked about. He paused, his arms tightening around her. I see us building a family, if you want that. Children who grow up knowing their mother is just as capable as their father. A life where we support each other instead of one of us diminishing the other. I want that, Catherine whispered, all of it. I want to build a life where I'm not afraid anymore, where I can be strong and soft at the same time, where I don't have to choose between safety and freedom because they're the same thing. Then that's what we'll build, Jacob promised, together. They sat in comfortable silence as night deepened around them. Two people who'd found each other in the wilderness and chosen to build something extraordinary from the ashes of their pasts. They married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Judge Harrison returning to officiate and half the town in attendance. Catherine wore her mother's pearls, recovered from her belongings, and a simple white dress she'd sewn herself from fabric Jacob had ordered special from Denver. Jacob wore his best suit, still bearing traces of dust from ranch work, but his eyes shone with love as Catherine walked toward him through the gathered crowd. I, Jacob Whitmore, take you, Catherine Hartford, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he said, his voice carrying across the assembled guests. I promise to protect you, cherish you, and stand beside you as your equal partner in all things. I see a woman worth every tomorrow, and I'm grateful you've chosen to build them with me. Catherine's voice was steady as she made her own vows, the words she'd written in the quiet hours of dawn. I, Catherine Hartford, take you, Jacob Whitmore, to be my lawfully wedded husband. I promise to stand beside you in strength, not submission, to build a life together, not hide behind you. You showed me that love isn't possession, it's freedom. Together, we'll make this wild land a home. Together, Jacob echoed, and when he kissed her, the crowd erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was music and dancing, food enough for an army, and toasts that ranged from heartfelt to ribald. Catherine danced with Jacob, with the ranch hands who'd become friends, with Judge Harrison, who told her she'd be an asset to Montana's future statehood efforts. But the best moment came late, when she and Jacob finally escaped to the room they would share, properly, legally, with her choice freely given. Nervous? Jacob asked softly, closing the door behind them. "A little," Catherine admitted. She sat on the edge of the bed, her heart racing. "Not of you, just the memories." "What, Marcus? Hey." Jacob knelt before her, taking her hands. "We don't have to do anything tonight, or tomorrow, or until you're ready. I married you because I love you, not because I expect." "I want this," Catherine interrupted. "I want you. I just need you to be patient, to let me lead sometimes, to remind me that this is different." "This is different," Jacob said firmly. "This is us. This is choosing each other. This is love, not violence, and we have the rest of our lives to figure out what that means." They went slow, discovering each other with gentle touches and whispered words. When Catherine froze at a sudden movement, Jacob stopped immediately. When she gasped at a sensation that brought pleasure instead of pain, he smiled and did it again. They learned each other's bodies the way they'd learned each other's hearts, with patience, respect, and growing joy. Later, wrapped in each other's arms as moonlight painted silver across the bed, Catherine felt truly safe for the first time in her life. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you too," Jacob replied. "Welcome home, Catherine Whitmore." 3 years passed in a blur of work, growth, and quiet happiness. Catherine stood on the porch of the expanded ranch house, one hand resting on her rounded belly, watching her husband ride in from checking the northern fence line. Behind her, their 18-month-old daughter Sarah, named for the wife Jacob had lost, played with wooden blocks, her dark hair curling in the morning sun. The Redemption Creek Bank had flourished under their joint management. Catherine handled the finances, restructured their lending practices to be more equitable, and established a reputation for fairness that brought business from 3 counties away. Jacob managed relationships, assessed character, and ensured the bank served the community rather than exploiting it. But Catherine was most proud of what they'd built beyond the bank. The literacy program met every Saturday morning in the bank's meeting room, teaching 30 women and girls to read, write, and manage basic finances. They'd established a fund that provided small business loans to women, loans that didn't require a husband's signature or male guarantor. 3 women currently lived and worked at the ranch, learning skills and saving money to start independent lives. One planned to open a dress shop, another was studying to become a teacher. The third was saving to buy her own small homestead. Catherine and Jacob had quietly become known as a sanctuary for women fleeing bad situations, a reputation that made them targets for some of the more traditional elements in the territory, but also gave them allies among progressive politicians and reform-minded citizens. Jacob dismounted and swept Catherine into his arms, carefully, mindful of her pregnancy. "How are my girls today?" "Your girls are fine. Your son, however," she patted her belly, "has been practicing his kicking all morning." "You think it's a boy?" "I know it is. He kicks just like you ride, with absolute confidence and no concern for anyone's comfort." Jacob laughed and pulled her close, his hand joining hers on her stomach. Little Sarah toddled over, demanding attention. Jacob scooped her up effortlessly, settling her on his hip with practiced ease. "Good day?" Catherine asked. "Better now." He kissed her temple. "Judge Harrison stopped by town. Montana might achieve statehood within 5 years. He wants to know if I'd consider running for the territorial legislature. Help write the new state constitution." Catherine considered this. "Would you want that?" "Only if you do it with me. Your ideas about education, women's suffrage, property rights, They need to be part of any new constitution. He looked at her seriously, his storm-gray eyes intense. Together? Catherine kissed him, their daughter giggling between them. Always together. That evening, after Sarah was asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, they sat on the porch in their customary spot. Above them, stars scattered across the sky in impossible profusion. The same stars that had witnessed their first tentative conversations, their growing love, their commitment to building something extraordinary. "Do you ever think about that day?" Catherine asked, "when I stepped off the stagecoach, desperate enough to trade my grandmother's necklace for a meal?" "Every day," Jacob admitted. "I think about how close I came to not walking down Main Street at that exact moment. How different both our lives would be if I'd taken a different route." "Do you have regrets about taking in a strange woman with trouble following her?" Jacob turned to her, cupping her face with the calloused hands she'd come to love. "Not even for a second. You brought life back to this place, to me. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine Whitmore." "You saved me," she said softly. "No," he shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a safe place to land while you figured out how strong you already were." Catherine leaned into his touch, remembering the terrified woman who'd fled Boston 3 years ago. That woman had believed she was weak, helpless, valuable only as an ornament or a transaction. But that woman had also had enough strength to run, to risk everything on an uncertain future, to choose survival over submission. She'd found a man who saw that strength and helped it grow, who stood beside her rather than over her, who built with her rather than for her. The wealthy heiress chose the cowboy to protect her on the stagecoach, Catherine murmured, repeating the words that had started this journey. Not knowing he would inherit the town's bank, Jacob smiled. And the cowboy chose the heiress, not knowing she'd help him build something bigger than either of them could have managed alone. "Together," Catherine said. "Together," Jacob echoed, and pulled her close as the Montana night embraced them both. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home? During your commute? Or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Catherine and Jacob's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.